So my name is Andrea Hutchins. I'm with Thomas P. Miller and Associates, and I want to welcome everybody to our second in our series in post-pandemic recovery. So last month, for those of you who joined us, we talked quite a bit about upskilling and reskilling the workforce in general. We talked about minority and at-risk populations and youth. And today we're going to continue that discussion, and we're going to talk about non-traditional education opportunities for upskilling and reskilling the workforce. So I have with us today what I would consider to be three experts in the industry. They are running very, very different organizations. I'm going to let them talk a little bit about their organization, but I just want to introduce Dewan Neely with 1150 Academy. I almost said EFA, but not everybody knows what that is. And then Lindsay Taylor with WGU, and then Joe Kitterman with 180 Skills. So Dewan, if you want to talk just briefly about 1150 Academy and what it is that you all do and what makes you all unique. So.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Yeah, Dewan Neely here. I'm the COO at 1150 Academy. We always get the question, what does 1150 mean? What does that stand for? Our academy was created about 7 years ago in our president and founder's basement, Scott Jones. And at the time, his address was 1150 116th Street. And so that's how we got our name. As I mentioned, we've been in operation for over 7 years. We are surpassing about 600 graduates from our program. And what we are is a accelerated, fast-paced skilling in cybersecurity, software development, and web development. And when I say fast-paced, that's 3 months for our full-time program and 6 months for our part-time program. And so our goal is to get you in, get you trained, and get you in a job before life has a chance to get in the way.
Well, that's great for post-pandemic recovery. So, all right, moving on to you, Joe, if you want to talk just a little bit about what it is that you do and what 180 does.
Sure. Thanks, Andrea. And thanks for having us today. It's a privilege. So I'm Joe Kitterman, founder and CEO of 180 Skills. We are an Indianapolis-based company that focuses on technical online skills training and certification, historically in the manufacturing sector, but now across several vertical markets, and really all of them when it comes to employability and non-essential or essential non-technical skills. I come to this after a 20-year career in automotive and aerospace manufacturing, and in particular, intimate experience with hiring very low-skill people and needing them to acquire high levels of technical skill, and just the challenges of that in a manufacturing environment, and my complete inability to execute on that in that setting. So been doing online in this space for about 20 years now. And it's just, again, fueled with a real passion that people who work are the ones who really get things done. We have a deep passion for hardworking, big-hearted people, but they are typically non-traditional learners who are scared of classroom, for whom traditional education just doesn't work for them. They need more time, they need more space, they need lower stress. So we've really focused on reaching that student, and then all the rest are easy. So excited to be here today. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks for being here, Joe. All right, Lindsay, we'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Yeah, I appreciate being here today. My name is Lindsay Taylor, and I am a strategic partnerships manager with Western Governors University here in Indiana. WGU is an online university, all completely online, competency-based learning model. We do offer bachelor's and master's degree programs in 4 areas of study. So business, teaching, information technology, and healthcare professions. We have over 120,000 students right now, and we're growing. We continue to grow every day. So thanks again for having me, and I look forward to good discussion today.
Absolutely. So thank you all for being here. Just a few notes that I want to point out now that you all have introduced yourselves to our attendees. I want to point out the fact that, obviously we have a very wide range of services that are being offered here on the panel today. So anything from a few weeks worth of training for certificates to a few months, and then even a few years. When we look at our audience members, I just want to remind everyone, they're really made up of education institutions, leaders in the workforce space, and then, even some practitioners. We also have a few consultants who join us from time to time to kind of learn things. So really today's panel is going to be focused on, how it is that you all are working both with partners and community members, and then what you're seeing as best practices to really be implemented into pandemic recovery mode. So we're going to kick it off with some of the questions that we had talked about previously. So I want to point out that you all were already in an online atmosphere prior to the pandemic. So for some people, that may be a struggle. And I know that certainly your landscape has changed quite a bit, even though you were already online when everybody else was kind of struggling to head that direction. So I want to kind of hear a little bit from you how your world has even changed post-pandemic or during the pandemic due to the kind of, onslaught of folks who have had to take everything virtual. And so, Dewan, we'll start off with you. I would just love to hear how the EFA atmosphere has changed since the pandemic.
Yeah, sure, Andrea. And we were, I would say for an academy that teaches tech, we had as a sort of a pride in ours, we focused really on immersive style training. And so we really appreciated that hands-on effect that we had with our students in our classroom. And so we treaded very lightly into online before the pandemic. We had very little because we wanted to keep folks who, our president always says we got to be able to pick them up off the floor since we're trying to teach them so much in such a short amount of time. So the pandemic shift for us to online was a pretty big shift for us, actually. We went home on a Friday, worked all weekend, and came back up on a Monday there in March, fully online, utilizing Zoom rooms and everything for instructors and the breakout rooms and everything. And so luckily, we have a chief learning officer who has studied distance learning before at previous universities and had an idea of how to do that effectively, and it served us very well. And so we are fully online. We have about 399 students currently enrolled right now, and apologize for the sirens downtown here. And so there were several shifts there. That was the kind of the first shift. And luckily, during the course of our regular training, we survey our students each week on the effectiveness. What's your pace of learning? Are you learning at the pace you expected? How are our instructors doing? And so we were able to compare that first half of March of 2020 with the second half of March after we pivoted online to make sure we're still doing what we intended to do. We did find a dip that very first week when we pivoted and shift online, but since then, through continuous improvement, we've continued to push that up and do different techniques to create that immersive concept that we're used to in person and emulate that online, and it's continuing to trend up. I think the other thing that shifted for us in a positive way was that before the pandemic, we were looking to expand into other regions across the state. Online obviously accelerates that very much for us and makes it quite a bit easier without having anything on the ground. And so we were able to reach some of the communities that we've been wanting to help grow from a talent perspective a lot faster with our online shift, and has been able to impact more people in our mission. And so it's changed kind of our thought set on what we do here going forward. But all in all, has been a positive shift for us. And, one positive outcome you can take from being forced to do all the things we had to do during this pandemic.
Excellent. Thank you, Dewan. Joe, I'm going to ask you the same thing. How has your landscape really changed since the pandemic? And what have you all had to do to either acclimate or help your partners do so?
Well, it's changed a lot. And I'll start with, our enrollments have grown from 40,000 to 220,000 learners today. So a massive uptick in enrollments, but I think what we've seen that's really significant is pre-pandemic, a lot of employers, institutions, and workforce boards, saw online learning as nice to have. And now in the venture capital speak, it's a must to have. And so it's been a great opportunity to test scaling the platform quickly and to demonstrate the value of self-paced online learning as it pertains to the learner and helping them achieve mission critical goals of career and employment. And, fortunately, the technology worked great, no big issues there, but we've expanded now to serving entire states in COVID recovery models, serving a broad range of students from adult basic ed, vocational ed to companies and COVID impacted residents, statewide college systems. So I think the axe is tilted and online skills training is here to stay. I don't think it will ever go back. So it's been kind of exciting, but a lot of work. It was a long summer.
Well, I'd say, and we haven't even started looking at summer of 2021 yet. I don't know about you guys, but that seems like it's light years away, right, in the pandemic world. So no, that's amazing. And those are outstanding numbers, Joe. So Lindsay, if you could just kind of address the same question a little bit, especially I know you guys have also been undergoing some expansion. How has the pandemic affected your world?
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. So, nobody's built their business or service for a pandemic, right? But at WGU, I think we've been fortunate because of our learning model that we were prepared for it. I want to go back because I mentioned in the introduction about competency-based education. And for those who don't know what that is, what that means is we're measuring your knowledge and your skills versus the seat time. So once you obtain the competencies that you need to pass a particular course, you move on. And so it truly is self-paced in that you bring in knowledge that you have and you may move through quicker. And if you need some additional brushing up, you can take that extra time until you meet that competency to move on. So that's what our competency-based learning model is. But I say that we've been fortunate because we are a university that's 100% online. So we've been able to consistently serve our students with little disruption. Now, that said, we've had to create a more flexible approach to helping students continue their degree programs while they adapt to things like homeschooling, their children, or our healthcare workers on the front lines working overtime, caring for COVID patients, being more flexible with course completion time for certain students. Additionally, we know that folks are facing financial struggles. And so WGU has provided millions of dollars in support in the form of emergency aid, grants, increased scholarships. Every day is a work in progress to adapt to the situation that we're in. So we just continue to work to meet the needs of our students and make sure that they feel well supported.
Oh, that's excellent. I think all three of you kind of hit on a little bit the fact that the landscape has been forever changed, right? So, as we look at non-traditional education opportunities, right? Like, I think that there's an understanding across the board that higher education will be forever changed due to the pandemic. So I would be really interested to see just kind of what your thoughts are as far as how the landscape has changed across the board, and then what areas of opportunity you think that there might be either in working with employers and communities directly, or even working with four-year institutions. I know that some of you already do that. And then I know with you, Lindsay, you guys are already a four-year model, but do you feel like there's additional partnership opportunities that have come up as a result of the pandemic? Just how do you think that the landscape in education has changed, and where do you think that there might be some additional partnership opportunities? I'm going to start back with you, Dewan.
Okay. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And, Joe kind of mentioned it as well. We were kind of forced to try some things that most folks were a little bit skeptical of before. You look at what's going on with businesses and, they're realizing they don't need as much real estate as they used to. And people will actually do the work, even though they're not in the office, imagine that. So they're trusting this new disconnected world to still achieve goals and objectives. And I think the same is going for, accelerated education, which is what I call us. You can call it non-traditional or accelerated education, but also the online space. Folks were that was kind of their only form of education, and depending on the areas they were in during this pandemic. And they found out, hey, this isn't so bad. I can still learn here. I can still be effective, and it even works out to be a bit more convenient than the latter. So I think that's changed with the realization that, hey, this is acceptable. Now let's figure out how we can all leverage, one another to bring about some better services or bring about more encompassing services. I see there's partnerships, and 1150 Academy is continuing to work closely with Ivy Tech Community College, and we're trying to figure out how can we use some of our accelerated programs to get folks up to speed in a potential area, get them credits faster, and be more of a capstone for some of their programs, or give them that immersive feel to go with the classroom feel on many of their programs there. So I think there's opportunities there, and it's all in the effort to get folks educated and kind of out in the workforce in a faster method. The big dilemma that the pandemic's leaving behind, unfortunately for us, is there's still a lot of folks without employment. And so what are the solutions we can collectively come together and create that helps get people back to work as fast as possible, and not continue to delay kind of, the economic impact that we have with folks being out of work. And very excited to help tackle that and partner with any and all to just figure that out.
No, Duan, that's a really good point. And actually, for those people who attended our last webinar, I feel like that was a theme throughout the webinar, was the need to partner. I think with something as incredibly upsetting as a pandemic, I mean, it just really has turned everything on its head. The ability for people to thrive in this atmosphere has really been for those organizations that are willing to adapt, and even more so those that are willing to partner. So I think those are really good points. So thank you. Joe, kick things over to you and ask you a similar question. When it comes to like the landscape for education, how do you see things being kind of forever changed? And then I think maybe too, if you could even hit on some of the partnership opportunities that you've seen kind of come out of this, I think that would be helpful for our audience.
Well, I think, huge fan, Lindsay, of your model. We are competency-based and self-paced and really believe learning should be up to the learner. And, we're not prescriptive. So where I've seen the landscape change is people embracing, if you bring them a large bucket of competencies, it's not that hard to organize them against a job description, a career goal, an academic program, deliver only what's needed to get the learner from point A to point B, charge only for that. So I think this whole value conversation around education in general got accelerated very quickly. What was going to take years happened in 6 months. And a lot of our, cherished academic partners, Dallas College, Wichita State, and others are now clearly stating that they will never, ever again be without a hybrid program option, where for many over the last 10 years, we've had some great schools who embrace that, giving students options of, learn knowledge and skills at home, come here for the hands-on, the high-value instructor-led training. But I think those options are going to be here forever now, because with or without a pandemic, that's really good for the learner, right? They can work it into their normal life. They can get it done. And again, Lindsay, I love your, go as fast as you want. And some people want to get something done in 6 months. Some people want to take a year. That's great. But I don't think you should tell the learner, you can't have this in less than 1 year, 2 year, 4 years, because that doesn't fit the needs. The real end goal and value is the career opportunity. And that's the learner saying, I got time to wait, or I need a job tomorrow. And so I think it's really shifted in terms of people seeing how important that is to the person to whom it matters, which is the learner. I'm in trouble, I'm out of work, I'm economically distressed, or maybe I've got a job that's okay and I want to get a better one. And I'm excited because, that's always been our goal. And I think it's proving that high quality education matters. Programs like ours, like WG, like 1150, that not all online education is the same. And for the learner, it needs to be engaging. And I think, opportunities that we're seeing now are much larger in scale. So we are currently powering 3 states, Connecticut, Indiana, and Mississippi, at almost the 100,000 user level in each state, and able to serve multiple stakeholder groups from one state central location where the learners can be managed, tracked, helped, coached. But getting people in the most remote locations imaginable, skills training, at 2 a.m, at 10 o'clock at night when the kids are in bed. And that, I think, again, is what's so important and been missing, is this time constraint that you have to come to some place at 2 p.m. to 3:15. And for the majority of people, that's just not an option in their life. And so I think, the opportunity now is education is so much more accessible for that population, and people are paying attention to that population. And so it's like the greatest day ever for us to see that, because that's where most of the world lives. And so I hope that makes sense.
It does. And you know what, Joe? So you hit on something that is kind of the whole reason that the three of you individually are on this panel. So one of the things that I have appreciated the most about each one of your organizations is that you all are truly encouraged by, and I feel like operate because you want to see people not only with better educations and better opportunities, but putting people to work and upskilling people really does truly seem like a passion of your organization. So that's one of the main pride points I think that we have at TPMA of working with you. So I think you hit the nail on the head. And then one other thing that you pointed out that I really think is important for our audience, especially, we are hearing on a regular basis that the Biden administration is going to have a renewed emphasis on education. I don't think that comes as a huge surprise to anyone. There are a lot of emphasis around rural communities and helping those disadvantaged communities in particular, those with minority populations or lower income populations that are in remote areas. And so I think, Joe, your point to being able to reach out to those rural communities is so incredibly important. So that was a good one. So thank you. So Lindsay, briefly, if you could also kind of just touch on that landscape change and just how things have changed for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, you said it perfectly. Folks are looking for the opportunity to be able to log on at whatever time of day it is. And trust me, I've got 2 young kids here that in many cases are doing e-learning at home. And if I need to get something done once they're home, it's later at night, right? So being able to have that access to be able to do that, whatever time of day it is, whatever works for me, I think what you said is perfect. That's what people need. That's what they're looking for. And I think that's a shift that we're making, and people are seeing that that's important. But I do think in general, we've seen a seismic shift in how higher education and training programs are going to operate in the future, because we were put in a situation where we had to adapt back last spring to, remote learning. And Dewan, you mentioned it. It was a task to make that shift and make that change. From our standpoint, online education has been what we've been doing for over the last 2 decades. And so we have a model that works well. And, we've been working to remove that hesitation or any negative connotation around online learning. And I do believe that most institutions and organizations will have had to adapt at this point to some form of remote and online learning, and they're finding their way in that. And as we move forward, during the pandemic and even post-pandemic, I feel like that landscape will forever be changed. But, I spoke with Chris Hutchison at EFA last week, about the potential of a partnership. And really, we just want to find ways that we can parallel, that we can work together in this time to create more and more opportunities for our students.
There's that partnership word again. So speaking of partnerships, I mentioned that a number of our attendees are from workforce boards and education institutions. So this is actually going to kind of be a two-part question. One, I want to know how you're working with workforce boards and partner education institutions. But two, and this is not necessarily something I had planned, but I think it might be a good kind of eye-opening perspective. If there is any area where you feel like members of workforce boards or education institutions are missing an opportunity, what could they be doing differently to quickly upskill and reskill the workforce? And I think you guys have all hit on this a couple of times where you've talked about the need to do things quickly. I don't think it's lost on anyone that there is still a huge demographic of folks who are out of work. There's still a huge demographic of especially disadvantaged people who continue to lose income. And so what are some opportunities there that you think are being missed by workforce boards or education institutions? And then how are you working successfully together? And so DeWanda, I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. So most of our model, there was a couple areas we're focused on in the state here to really help create a talent pool. Gary, Indiana, and the Westgate region are just two of those that we're looking at. And usually, even pre-pandemic, when we look for expansion like this, we want to bring everyone to the table. So that includes the local economic development entities that are there. That includes the private employers that occupy that space, and most importantly, the workforce boards and workforce development authorities that are there. Lindsay mentioned Chris Hutchinson. He kind of leads our partnership team. I sit in on his calls. He holds monthly calls with the Work One area in Gary, Indiana, and just gives them an update on, hey, here's what we're doing this month. Here's some free things we're offering that you can use at your your leisure to kind of help with your populations. Here's some areas that we're thinking about going into that we could use your input on. Just try to reciprocate. We want to help you. We realize that they're terribly busy right now, and we can feel it, just the amount of work and things that they're doing. I think the only thing that's missed is probably just caught up in not having enough time in the day. We would love to have more two-way communication with the workforce boards on what are the gaps that you're seeing from your folks, that the populations that are coming in. Are there things we can do by offering free training in other areas or specific training in some areas that would really help you in your specific region? And we realize it's different depending on where it's at. And so we want to make sure it is specific for what they're actually seeing for their particular region. And we'd like to help with our resources that we have. And so we share as much as we can with them in hopes that we can get to a point to where we're getting that feedback loop back, and we can improve or pivot or make changes where appropriate for each region, and just help them do their job better and give them effective ways to get their populations and their participants skilled up and back to work.
I think it's one of the silver linings from the pandemic is that folks don't seem to have the same geographic boundaries that they once had. So where you all had maybe only worked with companies in Indiana, now I think across the board, all three of you are working with states across the country. And so I think that's really important for our audience to know too, is that pandemic recovery is not something that just occurs with those education institutions or training institutions that are in your backyard. Right now, it's kind of the entire country is your oyster, basically. So Joe, what are your thoughts in that same vein?
Well, I think, we work in the workforce system in 9 or 10 states today and have for a long time. Traditionally, we work with employers, academic institutions, and workforce. So we've been, serving the federal workforce system. And I think, what states like Indiana have done in the last 6 months are extraordinary in that you have a state that is now feeding a library of easy to organize skills to all the regions in the state. And each one can take that and localize it in a matter of minutes to meet the needs of employers or, career opportunities in that region. Connecticut is doing the same thing. So I think in Indiana, nothing's missing. They're doing the right thing, and also making that library available to the employers and making it, it's back to the competency not being prescriptive, not telling an employer we have 10 programs you can choose from, telling an employer here's 800 skills courses and you can choose what you need to do what you need to do today, Mr. Employer. And we've onboarded in Indiana, probably 300 companies, and they're all unique and different. So I think the days of telling them we have 12 approved programs and that's it, that's all you can choose from, that hasn't worked well, especially for the employers, because they are all so different. They share a lot, but then there's unique things about each one, unique employment challenges. So we're now taking this evangelism to other states to kind of loosen it up. And yes, there are key skills everyone needs, but one size doesn't fit all. And it's really, as I say, it's been super successful in Indiana and Connecticut, who is doing the same thing, making this accessible to COVID impacted residents. Well, that's a broad population. You have some who need a job now, you have some who have a bad job and want a better one, and then you have some incumbent workers who just want to get to that next level. And it's not hard to do if you follow a non-prescriptive competency-based model and let the end user, the company, the learner decide what's best for them. But the workforce system traditionally has been very rigid in what it's allowed to deliver. It has to be approved, it has to be industry recognized, has to culminate in an industry recognized credential. And those are still very valuable, but that's not for everyone who's in trouble and in need of workforce aid, right? That can be Maslow level 3 for a lot of people who are down at 1 trying to do food, clothing, and shelter. So I think that's a big shift that we're seeing nationwide, and now seeing workforce boards request and specifically ask for these kind of delivery mechanisms that break away from the traditional mold of finite number of programs, mid to long-term completion, and have to pass a credential. So it's exciting to see, again, the focus being that person in need who needs to use those federal funds in the shortest amount of time possible to get what they need to get out of trouble and out of distress.
That is an excellent point, Joe. And once again, you brought up something that kind of leads on to another topic. We haven't even touched on CARES funding yet. I know that there's a lot of organizations that are sitting around with quite a bit of money that have yet to basically put all of their funds toward any one particular program. Part of it is analysis by paralysis. So it's unfortunate, but it is good to know that there are some communities who are putting things in place to upskill and reskill quickly. So appreciate that, Joe. So Lindsay, I'm going to kick this same question over to you. But before I do, we did get a question from the audience. I'm going to read this question just so that you all as panelists have an opportunity to think about it. And then I'll go back to you, Lindsay, to answer the original question. So the question from the audience is from Jim Spafford. Online learning is a significant challenge for many learners, especially for those who may have low literacy skills. What kind of additional support services are you providing for them, if any? So DeWanda, I'll kick that to you in a moment. But Lindsay, I want to go back to you in the question that we were just discussing regarding partnerships with workforce boards and how you're working with workforce boards. And then also if you're seeing any areas of opportunity where things could be done differently.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I've had this type of conversation with many organizations in many contexts over the last couple of months. But, we've been engaging a couple things. We've been engaging directly with organizations and workforce boards to determine, WGU programs that could potentially align directly with maybe new job opportunities that they may have. So what particular program will give an employee the competency and skills they need to move into another role. For example, funding for a specific set of roles is going away, but we want to be able to provide another place for these employees to go. So how do we reskill them, and what courses do they need to take in order to fill these roles? Additionally, WGU is launching a pilot through our Global Employment Readiness Education, or they call it GEAR program. And it's created to enable the workforce, in particular those that have been marginalized, to transform, their lives with new careers in like information technology. This program will create a viable pathway to employment, and it's also an on-ramp to a bachelor's degree program. So that will be kicking off in March, and it's really an opportunity to really give folks the skills that they need. I believe it's 6 months of courses, 6 months of apprenticeship, and then employment follows after that. And so it's really an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to take the skills that I have, be able to utilize those, get some additional training, go through this apprenticeship, and have immediate employment following that program. So we're excited about that. In terms of some things that, could be doing differently, I would just say, being open-minded. And I think society in general now had been forced to be more open-minded about online education, right? Because we've done that major shift to online education. So understanding that not everybody learns at the same level, at the same pace, and that there are options like EFA, like 180 Skills and WGU that, offer, skills-based knowledge that you can bring in and advance into other opportunities. So just being open and flexible to those options for their employees.
That's a great point. And I think Joe kind of hit on that same thing just a little bit. That gone are the days of traditional workforce development, right? Like there has to be a little bit more flexibility. And right now, when we look at all of the recovery funds that are going to be out there, I truly think that kind of having some outside of the box considerations and forming some partnerships that maybe didn't exist before are definitely going to be on the horizon for some folks. So Dewan, I'm going to read this question to you just real quick again, because I know I read it a few minutes ago. So online learning is a significant challenge for many learners, especially for those who may have low literacy skills. What kind of additional support services are you providing for them, if any?
Yeah, it's a very timely question. It's something we've been talking about a lot here, particularly for 2021, as we expand our reach and try to make our program more accessible for more more populations. And digital literacy is one that comes up. I mean, today, what we've done in the past is, we do assessments, obviously, to make sure folks have the best chance at being successful in our programs. We don't just let anyone in. And, usually some of the barrier there is the literacy piece, particularly when you're talking about programming, software development. You have to have a pretty good reading level to even get to the point where you can do that. And so it's one that we've realized that we need to put more focus on for this year. And we're a member of North Star, which is a digital literacy library. I think it started out of a library, and they've made a whole program of it that we've used in our assessments before. But I think we're looking to take it a step further this year to start that as a baseline and offer it more openly, on a free basis, just to give folks more opportunity to get exposed to that, help, start at the lower level there, because we realize you can't just start up here and say, hey, come to our academy and learn coding. Well, let us help you get this foundational piece first. And so we realize that is a missing gap and something we really want to help address on a wide scale here in our state this year.
That's excellent. Thank you, Dewan. How about you, Joe? Is there anything in particular?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that from a different perspective. So I've mentioned that we historically have served low-skill learners, and online learning, digital literacy can be a challenge, but it also comes back to instructional design for that learner. So, every course that we write, whether it's, addition, subtraction, multiplication, or a engineering program for Purdue, we write at 9th grade reading and math. Every word on the page is narrated. Every narrated word is visible, so we can help with English language barriers, literacy issues, and if you present the information to the student in very small bites, don't overwhelm them, no never-ending scroll bars that scare them, and hold their hand and go very gently and build from, ground zero to 50,000 foot skill level in a very gentle, progressive fashion, the learners will get to the finish line. And I mentioned we serve adult basic ed, and we have for a long time, and we've had learners with a fourth grade reading and math level finish mechatronic and industrial automation programs and CNC machining programs, and very highly skilled programs of learning, 2025 college credit equivalency programs. And it's really, I'll be honest, we get very little student support in terms of them not understanding the content, not being able to master the content. And back to Lindsay's comment, we're mastery based. So we teach what we teach, they need to know. So every course has a test, and every test, we require the learners to score 100%, but we give them multiple attempts to do that, and time and space and privacy. And you would be amazed, the lower skilled the learner, the more excited they get about being able to get an A in class, because nobody's watching, nobody's judging. There's no peers in the classroom that make them nervous or anxious. They don't have to expose themselves. So, if you really have to go into online with a hypersensitivity for that learner, and then everybody else is easy. Highly skilled people can move very quickly, finish a WGU course in a week. I may need 2 months, but at the end of it, I get to mastery, and I'm proud of myself, and I have the skills I need. So it's a design issue from our perspective. And then, we have a standard set of skill courses. There's 4 of them in the beginning that we require every learner to take. How to take an online class, how to use the course interface, how to use a browser. We make no assumptions about digital literacy. And I think those are, 30 minutes, they get through those, but you have to do the prep work, because from our perspective, if anything in the course is difficult or cumbersome, then the student will leave and the learning won't matter. So you have to really, really be super sensitive that that path is just wide open and clear, and there's no bumps that are going to cause them to get frustrated with the learning management system or the course interface or the controls. And then I think the last one that, we can't really impact is just bandwidth issues. I really want to see this country increase bandwidth, because the people we talked about earlier in remote locations, that's a huge issue. And taking any online course can be impossible if you don't have connectivity. So, sorry, that was a really long answer to your question, but
okay, that's why we're here. I know that the participants want to hear kind of all the tips and tricks that you guys have, and so that's good. I appreciate that, Joe. All right, Lindsay, how about you?
Yeah, so Joe, you hit on something at the end that is a hot topic right now, and that is, that digital divide that we see in our country about the lack of access for one reason or another. And that's one of the things WGU has really been focused on over the last, sometime, even pre-pandemic, this was in the works, because it's still been an issue. But, they may want to attend an online class, but they don't have the access to the internet to do it. And so, and I just wanted to speak on this really quick, Andrea, if you don't mind, but we've created an online access scholarship that will allow for students to apply to have internet access covered. WGU will cover the cost of installation, as well as the cost of the monthly fee for that service through the duration of their program, as long as they stay in good standing, as well as provide a refurbished laptop and a webcam. If there's somewhere where they can't have, they don't have internet available, then we will provide a hotspot. And so that is something that we've really been focused on in terms of how can we remove that barrier, right? That specific barrier that affects a lot of folks. I'm in an area now where you would think that you could have easy internet access, but that's not the case, and you'd be very surprised where there is not. So I wanted to make that point really quickly. That with WGU, our model is really set up for a very student-centric perspective, and I mean that in several ways, and I'll touch on this briefly. We have a program mentoring model where each student is set up with what we call a program mentor from the day one all the way through graduation. And this person is not only the student's cheerleader and support, but they are there for those one-on-one calls, weekly, daily if needed, and really to support the student through, to be as at their best throughout their entire program. And secondly, beyond that, WGU has been working on more individualized learning models because we know each and every student learns differently. So how do we monitor each student as they progress through a course to support them after an assessment, and say, okay, let's regroup and let's figure out how we can do better on this next one, because that is probably very different than maybe how another student completed. So really working on those individualized learning models for each one of our students and how we support each one of them from day one through graduation.
Thank you, Lindsay. And the continued conversation about digital divide, that could be an entire webinar all in and of itself. So it's amazing that you guys are doing those things, kind of the outside of the box connectivity support and whatnot. You did kind of open the door for something that I think is across all of the panelists, an area that would be good to kind of touch on, because you all do things not only differently, but also unique, I think, in the atmosphere, which is financing, right? So financing either for employers or for participants or users or the whole nine yards. So I'm going to ask Duan and Joe to follow up a little bit on that as well. And then if there's something that you want to follow up on, Lindsay, toward the end that relates to the cost structure piece, I'd be happy to let you do that. So Duan, you all have a very interesting financing mechanism that you do for your program. Do you want to talk just a little bit about that?
I'd love to, Andrea. And I'm not sure if I mentioned on the onset, but 1150 Academy is a not-for-profit. And so we do spend quite a bit amount of energy helping our students seek out funding opportunities to help cover their, cost of tuition and cost of training, and try to make it as little out of pocket as needed for them. And, one of the things that we have developed from the great mind of our president and founder, as we expand to communities, so for instance, take Evansville, which is an area where we're looking to help grow talent. We've been able to work with the IEDC, Vectran, and other folks there in the community in Evansville to create a progressive income share agreement for students that are looking to upskill in that region. So the funds specifically for that region, there is a board of individuals that live in that region, whether it's employers, economic development, or whatnot, that kind of dictate how that's used. And so any money that is put in there, it currently is matched by the IEDC, and it's used for students to take training with 1150 Academy right now. It could be used for other training providers that provide, great results as far as graduation and placement and salaries and whatnot. But the way Scott has designed that is it's meant to be a pay it forward fund, meaning that as long as we place a student in a role and they're earning right now more than $42,000, they only pay back the principal of what they used, and that's it. And that payback is even capped to 5% of their salary, so it's not an undue burden while they're trying to get started in their career. And that goes back into that fund then for a future student. And the hope that that's where the pay it forward piece comes from. And so anytime we work with communities and we want to start a project in their community to grow their talent pool, we're really pushing to create these funds for that community and try to help it be self-sustaining to help grow the region there.
That's amazing and a really unique financing model. So thanks for sharing that. How about you, Joe? Anything about your financing model or methods or just costs in general that you want to share?
Sure. So we've taken a different approach in that we sell access. So each learner gets access to the entire library of 800 courses, and that's growing daily. But the disruption we're trying to create in the ed tech space is that access shouldn't cost much. So at the most expensive entry point, it's $96 a year, $8 a month for a learner to access the entire library and consume what they need. So we haven't had the need for financing. At scale, we get down to, $15, $10, depends upon the volume, but we're trying to prove that we can grow the business through increasing the opportunity for access and not limiting it. And early on, when we first launched a SaaS model, our prices were very different, and employers and schools were very picky, and they would enroll 30 students or 100 students where we want to see them give this to the entire campus. And so it's really paid off, and we're constantly working on driving down the cost of delivery so that we can keep bringing that price point down. And then we also have a program called Skills to Pay the Bills. So for each new client that we acquire, we give away student licenses to marginalized, impacted people. And so we've been able to, grant access to some of the people that are in trouble. And we've been doing that now for a couple of years and trying to reach low income marginalized people with free training. So, but yeah, we're trying to prove that high quality education shouldn't cost much, and pretty passionate about that today.
No, definitely appreciate that. And I love the skills to pay the bills. It's quite
That's what
catchy.
it's all about, right?
Yes, yes. So, all right, Lindsay, anything that you want to wrap up in that particular question?
Yeah, WGU operates on a unique, what we call flat rate tuition model. So our tuition is paid actually per 6 months, not by credit. So you pay, this low price for the 6 months, and you get as much learning. Some I've heard say all you can learn model within the 6 months. And so I think that makes us unique. And, because we're, we don't have classrooms or sports arenas or anything like that, we keep our operations costs low, and we're able to pass that, savings right back onto our students.
Awesome. So we do have one more question from the audience that I'm going to take. If you all in the audience have any additional questions that you would like to add to the Q&A, there will be a follow-up wrap-up email that you'll be receiving from TPMA that will have just kind of highlights. And then we will put the entire video, except for the intro part where we were chatting, on our YouTube channel. So you'll have access to go back and listen to any of these things again. But there will be some wrap-up and outreach done via email. So for our panelists, I'm just going to ask this final question from the audience. And then after this kind of round robin, we'll do a wrap up. So maybe be thinking about any closing comments that you would like to add as well. So this question is from Ken Carroll. It is my understanding that regional WIOA boards typically must recruit, screen, and assess clients before they purchase the exact number of online training licensing and seats needed for the specific number of clients which has been qualified, which is a good point. By the time the aforementioned process is completed, it may take 8 to 12 or more weeks before the client can be placed with a company. What can be done to streamline this process in order to get the client placed in a more timely manner? So, Dewan, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I think it's been sort of the theme we've been chatting about today on the partnership side. I think each of our entities, Lindsay and Joe, I think we all have teams that can do screening, assessments, and qualifications. To where if we're more closely partnered, we could talk about ways that we can lean in and help with some of this pre-screening to see who's a good fit for what programs, and just, for lack of a better word, kind of crowdsource some of that activity. But that involves a lot more conversations, a lot more keeping in sync with one another on what's going on, what we're seeing. But I think all of us have resources we can provide to help in those problem areas where it is taking a lot longer to get folks through the process and put into a proper program that fits for them. Just my 2 cents.
No, that's an excellent point. And, one of the things, this goes back to the partnership discussion earlier, right? I realize that it is, like to Ken's point, it's a time intensive process, but some of these things can be outsourced through partnerships. I mean, similar to the way that we're outsourcing apprenticeships and things like that. I think that there's a lot of creative ways that we can form contracts and even federal contracts to make things more of an expedited effort. So how about you, Joe? Any thoughts in that regard?
Well, I appreciate Ken's question, and I think it's a policy question, and our workforce board partners have federal regulations they have to follow to qualify a learner for benefits from the Department of Labor, and it sometimes seems onerous and time intensive, and it does take a long time. So I think everyone on the call, do everything you can to force policy change, because it's not because the workforce boards think they need to do it that way. It's what the federal government says they have to do, or they can't give the student the funds they need to access, federally funded training. And it is sad, and it does take a long time. And I think initiatives like Indiana, where we've been able to move more freely and rapidly, and understand in Indiana, any resident can go online and fill out a form, first name, last name, email, and county of residence, and they receive training in the next 2 minutes. That's where we got to go. People in trouble, don't make it hard, don't have a list of qualifications. And same thing in Connecticut and Mississippi, and it's worked really well for the learners. It's stripped that process Ken talks about away. Now, that's being done in the face of a pandemic. Will that last long term? I don't know. It should, but giving people that type of easy access, they are going to it, taking advantage of it, versus a page with 57 questions and papers to fill out and time to wait. And, I think there are some rules that require 12 hours of attendance at the workforce center before they receive training. And I'm not going to say those are bad laws, but I think now they just don't fit the model. So everybody on the call, please, talk to your senators and congressmen, and let's lobby to get DOL to relax some of those antiquated requirements.
Absolutely. And as we look at this next round of pandemic recovery funds that are going to be coming down the pike, and even into the future, right? I mean, so we know that there's another round of funding in some way, shape, or form that's going to be coming down the pike. I would venture to say that there's going to have to be other types of recovery efforts in the next 18 months to 2 years to continue to move this needle. I mean, this has just been a dramatic change. I think you bring up a really good point, Joe. For those states who already have those policies in place to make things impactful and can adapt quickly, that's great, but not every state is that way. So for those members of the audience that are not in Indiana, so Indiana put together some really unique rapid recovery plans, which, I mean, full disclosure, Thomas P. Miller and Associates did help to craft. But, I look at like EFA, Indiana residents can take EFA courses for free, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And then the same thing with 180 Skills and WGU. I know that you all have done some things with the state as well. And so, definitely applaud the state of Indiana for doing some outside of the box, really quick, rapid recovery work. But in large part, it's because they had a plan. So anyway, not to throw that in there, but I'm just going to mention that. So, I know, sorry. So I do just want to give you all an opportunity to wrap up maybe a 5-minute or so kind of closing thoughts for each of you. Just where do you want to leave our audience with today? If we talked about all of these different things related to rapid recovery and upskilling and reskilling, maybe some closing thoughts that you might have. DeJuan, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. there's been some good themes today, and the ones that stick with me and really play into the plans that we have at 1150 Academy for this year are focusing on the learner and doing whatever we can to remove the barriers, whether it's digital literacy, whether it's broadband, whether it's childcare, you name it. What's the barriers that are in the way? And so, our call to action from 50 Academy is we're looking for partners. And those partners are a lot different, as you mentioned earlier, Andrea. I mean, we're looking at faith-based organizations, the local churches, as we really want to focus on the most vulnerable populations in those areas, and making sure they understand there is opportunities in technology for them. Who best to know those communities and what their needs are than the local churches, the local community efforts and businesses that are there, let's work together more to say, here's something we can offer from a training. It doesn't have to say 1150 Academy. It can say, let's use something that the community knows, but how can we work together to eliminate some of these barriers and open up that access, starting with digital literacy and getting folks into at least understanding that, hey, this could be a good avenue for you for a sustainable career for the future in the technology. That's what we'll be focused on, and we're looking for partners to help with that effort.
Excellent. Thank you, Dewan. How about you, Joe? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, everybody get comfortable. It's time to go to church now. I'm kidding, but I think, as I sit here with Dewan and Lindsay, we're all using the same word. It's about access. And I think what I find frustrating is, even the three of us are disconnected, and wouldn't it be great if our students could, meet Dewan and be halfway down the road and then come to Lindsay. So I think there's still a lot of work to connect all this together on behalf of the learner in a meaningful way that leads from skills training to, certifications, to college credit, to degrees. And there's just so much more to do. I think we're all believers in access. And to me, back to your very first question, that's what's changed. The world now understands access isn't a luxury. It isn't a nice to have. It's something we all need. I could need it tomorrow. Who knows what will happen in my life or my world. So having it accessible is the only way to go, and making that easier for the learner. So, Dewan and Lindsay, huge fans of what you guys do and why you do it. And to the audience today, one of the things that I love the most about what we do is the people we get to work with, who are all of you on the call, are out there trying to make a change in people's lives. And, it's not the highest paid occupation on earth, but it's it may be the most rewarding. And when you see these learners do extraordinary things, we had an adult basic ed student finish what we call a career program last week, which is about 3 months worth of work, 25 credit hours. And, 4,000 pages of content and 3,000 test questions they had to answer. And you sit and ask yourself, could I do that? And oh my gosh, this person without a high school diploma did that in their difficult life. It lifts you up and it tells you this does work. Give people access and, give them some hope, and they will do the work, against all odds. So I just want to thank everybody on the call today, because none of us would be here without you. So, what you do is important, and we're just, fortunate and blessed to be part of this ecosystem. So thanks to everybody, and Andrea, to you and your team for sure. So,
Joe, for some reason, I don't know if it's because of the way that you started that, but I want to say take it to church, right? Like,
we're going to be here a while.
I know you started it with the church analogy, so I couldn't help it. Sorry. All right. Thanks, Joe. How about you, Lindsay? Any closing thoughts that you would like to add?
Yeah, well, I think that, with Dewan and Joe, we all have come here today and have very similar hopeful outcomes in expanding, access, right? And Joe, I think you said it, that people, if they didn't know it before, didn't realize it before, they really have now through the pandemic, that not everybody has the same access. And so, WGU, really our focus moving forward is continue research and implementation of how we can advance equity. That we know that minorities and rural populations have historically been underserved by higher education. And, some of the things that we're doing, WGU Labs, which is an affiliate of WGU, last year, they started a project to seek to understand those systems and processes that lead to the inequities, right? And how we can, evaluate that by examining, a WGU student experience from application through enrollment through graduation. We really hope through this research and discovery that, the findings will help us create and implement a plan for student equity over the next several years. That's really a focus of ours. It's really, we believe it's one of the biggest, not just opportunities, but obligations we have to individuals who want to better their lives and the lives of their family. Talent is universal, but opportunity and access is not. So we'll continue to work to remove barriers and strive to make college more accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right. So I think in closing, the big theme here today was partnership and also access. So taking things from there, we will definitely be doing some follow-ups. I want to remind everybody that we do have an ongoing series about pandemic recovery. On the 24th, we will have a discussion regarding the role of the economic developer in pandemic recovery. But moving forward, we are planning on some more poignant things related to workforce and education, like prior learning assessments and crosswalks and things like that. Don Busick on our team and Roy, the two of them are just a wealth of information. So we're going to be having them participate in some panels as well. I want to thank the three panelists that joined us here today from 1150 Academy, 180 Skills, and WGU. You guys both or all bring such a unique and diverse, I think, view of the current atmosphere and the current landscape when it comes to upskilling and retraining the workforce. And so I really just want to thank you all for the individual passion that you all bring to the table. I think it really does shine through in some of your answers. And I know some of the partnerships that you've created. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for being a member of the TPMA team. We really appreciate working with you guys.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
All right.
Thanks.
I will give you all back 7 minutes of your afternoon. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.